so the Templars started it, or I've heard they kind of went on a journey and learned some information somewhere and then came back and started their banking.
Well, they had quite a bit of commerce with the Muslims that they interacted with, and they learned a lot of materials from them. But after the loss of the Holy Lands, and the Templars didn't really have a reason to continue together in terms of protecting the Holy Lands, that's when they got into banking, and they had a huge amount of money, and the Pope had allowed them to charge rent for their money. They also invented a lot of other banking services, like the traveler's check. That was something the Templars created, and they charged a fee for all these services. And the treasure of the Templars is really no more mysterious than the fact that as the only banking entity in Europe, and the only banking entity allowed to basically charge interest, of course they're going to become incredibly rich and powerful, but at the same time, they plunged all of Europe's rulers into tremendous amounts of debt. Now, one of my ancestors is a Templar, but on the other hand, they sort of deserve the kicking they got from Philip the Fair, as does the present-day Federal Reserve.
So what the Vatican's policy pre-Templars?
Pre-Templar was that usury was bad, because they had seen how usury had destroyed the Roman Empire.
Personally, for me, I remember I'd get my lunch money, spend my money on lunch at school, and then go out with a friend, and, could I borrow a quarter for a candy bar? I'll pay you back tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Sure. And then there were the other kids who would say, well, you got to pay me back 50 cents tomorrow.
Yeah.
To me, that made them not my friend.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it is possible to have community banking where, the community can get together, and, the original model of banking was that money was loaned out of the deposits of the community, and the interest charged simply covered the operational costs. Today, of course, with the Federal Reserve, the money is created out of thin air and then loaned out at full face value plus interest, and you must repay it in labor. You're not allowed to simply print up the money out of thin air the way the Federal Reserve does. It's a legalized counterfeiting operation, and they impose some rules on it to try and keep it from going completely out of control. But obviously, every time Ben Bernanke flips on that printing press of his, the value of the money you've already earned and worked for and have in your pocket or your saving account, it's vanishing. That's why I call him Lord Ben Voldemort, because every time he flips on the printing press, by dark magic, the money, the true purchasing power in your pocket disappears and reappears in the pockets of the Wall Street elite.
So, so someone like Gaddafi gets demonized in the media.
Because he had a gold-based dinar, and he had, for every note in circulation, there was gold in the repository, although it's probably been looted and taken, probably covered with Comex gold shards by now. But that was exactly it. A value-based currency anywhere in the world is a major, major threat to the banking establishment as it exists at the Federal Reserve and the IMF and the ECB. And that's why they're making all these wars on the Islamic states that are still practicing the Islamic model of a loan plus a flat fee, and so that you don't get into this accruing interest. Because one trick that bankers really like to do, and they used to do it here in the United States as a form of foreign policy, they would go down to South America and they would loan money to the governments, and then the CIA would go in and do things like crop sabotage and industrial sabotage so that the governments couldn't pay the money back on time, drove up the debt until the point where the U.S. government could go down to these South American countries and say, well, we'll let you off the hook a little bit for the money that you owe as long as you will sell your bananas to United Fruit for half the normal price. And they start doing things like that, and the people go into poverty and starvation and hunger, and United Fruit gets richer. They were a big supporter of Richard Nixon. And, the cycle repeats again.
And let's sell your own water from your own country to your own people.
Yeah. The last James Bond movie actually touched on that water is going to be privatized. We're already fighting wars for oil. We're going to start fighting wars for water.
Well, it's interesting you brought up South America, because Hugo Chavez has announced the gold sucre,
yep.
And we also know he's asked for all his gold to come from Western countries. What
Yes.
do you see the future of that? Because there's a treaty between Russia and Venezuela now.
Yeah, and we're attacking a lot of the countries where Russia has treaties, and at some point I think Russia's going to quit playing Neville Chamberlain to America's Hitler and say, okay, you guys are working this hard for a world war, we're going to give you one. As far as Hugo Chavez, there have been several assassination attempts on his life. Again, his gold-backed, state-issued currency is a threat to banking systems like the Federal Reserve, the IMF, and the ECB. They'll find some excuse to go down there and wage war on him.
You think they're that crazy?
They're not that crazy. They just understand that, you know, if the entire world is forced to use the Federal Reserve type system, then the entire world will permanently be a debt slave to the bankers. Because the whole idea of that Federal Reserve system is the instant that first Federal Reserve note goes into circulation, more money is owed to the central bank than actually exists. And that's why you can never pay it back. That's why you can never get out of debt. It's a permanent trap, and it's designed that way. I read an article about it on my website called The 10th Marble that basically simplifies this whole idea. And the article went viral like about 300,000 in the first couple of days, I think. And basically it said that any 5-year-old boy knows that if you put 10 marbles into a can, you can only take 10 marbles out. But the Federal Reserve operates on the theory that they can put 10 marbles or dollars into the country and then take 11 marbles or dollars out, which means bankers are dumber than 5-year-old boys. But that's basically the nature of this debt trap, and it's designed that way. And that's why Andrew Jackson was so opposed to it. You know, he understood the instant you let a private central bank issue your public currency at interest, that your country is a slave to that bank, and there's no way out short of basically shutting the bank down and hanging all the bankers, which, if the stock market crashes again, probably will happen.
That wasn't that an issue between Thomas Jefferson and, you know, creating the first Bank of America?
Between Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson.
Alexander Hamilton was very much a banking person and was trying to get the U.S. to go into debt as quickly as possible because that would build their credibility with Europe, which was already on this private central banking model, the Bank of England and all the rest of it. Thomas Jefferson very much was opposed to that. And ultimately, that was one of the issues that led to the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
Okay, so you're here for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. What are your impressions?
Well,
so far?
Obviously, we were not here for the first 9/11, and living out in Hawaii, it's always been kind of this remote event, and to actually be walking around the streets where it happened and visiting the firehouse from the 9/11 documentary and going down to ground zero. I mean, the last time I was down there, the towers were still standing. So it's given a tremendous immediacy to the event that I wasn't feeling before. And to talk to the New Yorkers who had to live through it, a lot of them really want to put it behind them. They're actually a little kind of angry at all the hoopla, and I think they're ready to move on for the whole situation.
What have you thought about the media coverage?
Well, the media coverage obviously has been highly propagandistic. The U.S. war machine is trying to sort of revive the pro-war fever by waving 9/11 at us one more time. Rather they do that than stage a new one. But I think more and more of the corporate media is starting to pay attention to the 9/11 truth movement, and we had this just wonderful article appear in the UK Guardian just today reporting on our event that was almost glowing in its praise of our motives and our command of the facts and our obvious dedication to the truth.
Now, what would be your ideal future? I mean, how do we get over this divide and conquer strategy and realize that we don't need $1 billion? What do you really get? You know, people hang themselves in their Malibu mansions overlooking the ocean. How do we change this mindset to make people see the emptiness of material?
Well, unfortunately, our corporate media basically reinforces that whole idea that your worth as a human being is solely in terms of your possessions and, you know, acquisition for the sake of acquisition. And, you know, right here in New York at Wall Street is literally the cathedral, the Vatican of the money junkies, if you would say that. And as long as our corporate media reinforces that set of values, we're going to be in trouble. Now, I think the values are going to change very quickly because as all these economies around the world crash, I think people are going to come to understand that maybe the pursuit of wealth, just for the pursuit of wealth, wasn't such a good path to be on. I know that the failing of the United States of America can be summed up very simply by saying that our nation began making products to make money and then switched to making money the product. Taking money, taking debt, packaging it, moving it around, shaking it back and forth in the hope that it would somehow grow. And people fell in love with gaming the system. And ever since the end of World War II, we've had a management culture with no respect for manufacturing the products. And that's why, one of the reasons why all the jobs got sent to other countries. They just want the money to go to Wall Street and play in that giant open-air casino, and the rest of the country's needs and concerns just really aren't a factor anymore.
Well, what can the people do?
I'm actually counseling patience because I think we're coming up on a time when we're going to see the economic system and the government of the United States collapse the way they did in the Soviet Union, which means we'll get a new government without having to pay for it in a great deal of blood. And I think that would be a consummation devoutly to be wished. I'd like to avoid a violent revolution, but I think we're at that stage in history where it's either going to be collapse of the current government or forceful takedown of the current government. I don't think there's any other way.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to think of how in Japan after the tsunami there was no reports of any craziness. It was a help your neighbor.
It's a very, very different culture. Very, very different culture.
And you know, if people go to their banks and their ATMs don't work and the bank tellers go, sorry, I mean, Americans are gonna go nuts.
Well, I thought Americans would have gone nuts long before now after all the lying. And there's actually a lot of people who are asking, why haven't we gone Cairo yet? Why haven't we gone the route that Iceland did? How much more abuse can the American people take and still go on saying, thank you, sir, may I have another?
I thought it would happen in 2000.
It came close. I mean, it's starting to happen up there in Michigan and Wisconsin, rather. And we'll just see what happens. Rasmussen poll says we're in a pre-revolutionary phase. It's just waiting for that one spark that everybody understands represents that the country has gone wrong, that the government does not represent we the people, and that continued obedience to this government means our kids are going to die horribly and we're going to starve. I mean, our government is already at the point right now of looking around at all the people they owe money to and deciding who they're going to stiff, and they're starting with Social Security. You know, they talk about, oh, we can't afford the entitlements. That's our money. The government borrowed the money that we paid into Social Security to spend on wars in Israel. Now they can't pay it back, and they're trying to find some way they can stiff us on that and make us think that it's all our fault, or it's our patriotic duty to forego the retirements that we've already paid for. Can you take a picture of us together?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Here we go.
It's a video camera, so
Oh,
just...
oh, those are cool.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
are
Just,
cool.
am I doing it right?
Yep.
Okay, and then
Yep.
it's going right now.
Here we are in New Orleans, in the French Quarter.
There you go. Great.
All right, thank you.
I'll transport.
Yeah. So,
Renzi,
did you ever meet Renzi?
No, that's what I said.
were away,
I'm out
didn't
in
he?
Hawaii. Everybody I know over the internet. This is the first time I've had a chance to actually meet people in the real world. You know, like Richard and and Webster Tarpley and Ray McGovern, and I know all these people, and we've traded correspondence, and I've had a couple of them on my radio show. I've never been able to actually meet them face to face. I got to tell you, the big disappointment is that Cynthia McKinney canceled on us because I was looking forward to giving her such a big hug.